I love the music of the 1960s a lot. The Beach Boys were releasing 3 albums a year. The Beatles were putting out 2 albums a year.
What would you love to see change within the music scene in Reno?
The problem that faces a lot of artists now is just where to start.
Do you write with kind of that inspiration, like what if these bands back in the 60s had the technology now?
I think a lot of great music came out because of that. It's like candy.
It brings a tear to my eye.
And you're like,
You get caught in the weeds.
now we're cooking.
Welcome back to the Reno Life Podcast. My name is Joel.
I am Brian.
We are so grateful to be joined by an amazing musician, songwriter, producer, Reno's own Michael
Tegio.
Thank you so much. Welcome to the show. One of the things that struck me when looking at some of your material is the volume of work that you've done over the last 5 or so years. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've actually released 5 studio albums since 2020.
5 studio albums, 2 compilation albums. I could technically 3 compilation albums. It's kind of weird how you want to slice it, but the way that I count it is 7 total, 5 studio, 2 compilation. There's kind of a canonicity to these things, you know.
Not only is that a lot, but it's all you.
It's all me.
Of that album that remind me of the name of that album.
It's called Average Subjects by Michael Tegio.
Yeah. So I listened to that in its entirety today. And was I listening to 100% Michael?
All Michael Tegio. The only things on that album that aren't Michael Tegio are the various samples that I used at the end of Nuclear Secrets, My God, What Have We Done, which are sourced from various 20th century nuclear-related paraphernalia. There's recordings of leaked conversations between Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger. There is audio from Lyndon B. Johnson's Daisy commercial from 1964, which you hear at the very end. It says, "These are the stakes. We must either love each other or we must die." There's dialogue taken from atomic test films and stuff like that. Harry Truman's speech about the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, those are the only elements that aren't included, or that aren't me. Otherwise, everything is from myself and my 10 fingers.
That's very impressive.
That is very impressive.
And
I design the artwork too. I'm also a graphic designer.
Fantastic.
Did you go to school for that?
I did. I've always had an interest in media and making stuff. My parents can attest. I used to make Lego stop motion films. I still have most of them actually, which is really cool. And so I've always had this interest in making stuff. I always loved making stuff. Just I guess I have people have itchy feet. I got itchy hands. I have to be doing something
with your hands.
Yeah, and so I originally started out doing that because I'm 23, by the way. What Gen Z kid that kind of grew up with the early YouTube kind of thing wouldn't want to make Lego stop motions? So I was doing that, and so that kind of introduced me to concepts of framing and lighting and really basic photographic principles. And then, of course, you have to have sound to go with that. And you could just put a song over it, and plenty did back in the day and would basically make Lego music videos. But then if you wanted to record dialogue, well, how do you get a microphone? Okay, cool. Like, how do you sync things up? How do you time that? So those earliest Lego stop motion attempts when I was like 8, 9, stuff like that, maybe even a little older, I can't quite recall. Those were in a lot of ways really foundational in teaching me what could come next, what I could do next. What I could do next, just how to do it.
Yeah.
We're not here to talk about Lego stop motions.
We could.
Yeah.
Actually used to do the same thing.
Yeah, dude, right on. Nice. Dude, yeah.
No, I love what you were saying about having itchy hands. Brian is the listener of the music, and I do love listening to music, but I am much more of a creator of it. Mm-hmm. And
we have 2 different ways of going about that's how we kind of consume music, for sure.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, and I appreciated that about him, of like, I can see, because he'll like ask me about certain albums and I can tell that like this is somebody who appreciates music in a very different way than I do. Mm-hmm. But probably the same amount in that different way.
Very
and
equal.
so
you can different.
There's so many ways that you can appreciate music.
Yeah. It's a left brain, right brain, left brain, right brain sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so even for your genre, and I'm getting way ahead of myself here.
Yeah, we have a whole thing planned.
But I want to, while it's fresh on the mind, like your genre is definitely a blast from the past in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And so a lot of people, maybe they're on the cutting edge or appreciating the cutting edge of technology and then pop music.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Where then someone like you is sort of reminding us of where we've been in music with your style. And I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And really powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that one of the worst things that anyone can do is to stop in any capacity, like stop listening to new ideas, stop hearing new things. And so I'm 23, but a lot of the music that I'm interested in is centered around the years 1955 to 1970, that kind of 15-year period. And we can talk about that too. But I love new music. I think new music is fantastic. I think that what new technology has enabled is really great. I think that the way that we write songs and how that's changed and evolved over the years and kind of plotting those changes is really interesting to hear. Like, I'm a really big fan of 80s rap. I think is really cool. I like EDM. Like, just, it's so cool to do these things. Oh, sorry, I'm wiggling on the chair. But it's so cool to like take all of these threads and put things together and then like see this beautiful tapestry of art. So I guess the reason why I bring that up is that I don't want to be the kind of guy who's just like, oh, music was better when TV was black and white and you could buy a hamburger for a nickel.
You don't want to limit yourself.
No. And so many do and take pride in that. And I think I'm like, come on, better,
Right.
Eat your vegetables.
We had a guy named J-Rad Cooley on last week, and he does like he describes it as roots music. So or like country blues surrounding that genre, which is not very mainstream, not super popular, however, is a big part of even like American history. And we were talking about, or Brian and I were talking about it later, how it's like, it's really important to have people carry on these types of music that are, maybe have fallen by the wayside a little bit, and how we even wanted to incorporate growing or giving a platform for those genres with Reno Live, because what we want to do is we want to collect all of the live music happening in Reno, whether it's at the Grand Theater, the GSR, or in the corner of a coffee shop.
Exactly. I like that word cultivate. That's really good. Cultivate and collect. I'm really big on archiving. That's totally separate of a lot of this stuff, but
I feel like a lot of the stuff out there right now in Reno, like promoting music and anything in the music scene is really kind of niche, and it's very centralized, and we kind of just like, we're just lovers of music, live music, anyone who plays an instrument, and listening to music. You don't want to confine yourself and limit yourself, and we don't want to limit ourselves in Reno either. It's just the whole community at large. And
love for the whole world.
Knowing how difficult it can be to even finish and release one song, how do you maintain your momentum or your sort of your enthusiasm on a project to get to the point of releasing a whole album? Not only a whole album, but 5 of them. It's over a short amount of time.
I would say that the thing for me that motivates me to complete work or complete the stuff that I do or make the stuff that I do, I would say is my idols. A lot of the music, as you can tell by my shirt and my hair and my sound and everything, I love the music of the 1960s a lot. And in the 60s, this was not so much an artistic thing as much as it was record companies having a vice grip over artists.
Totally.
But the Beach Boys were releasing 3 albums a year. The Beatles were putting out 2 albums a year. The Monkees put out 3 albums in 1967. I mean, just like more often than not, when you do look back to those artists of that time from 1960 to about maybe like 1966, like they're doing multiple albums per year. And to me, I find that really inspiring. Not just specifically the fact that there are that many albums, but that I've gone the next step and looked into the history of these artists and finding out like just kind of that workhorse mentality that a lot of them had. I mean, they would be going from the road to the studio, to the road to the studio, to a radio interview, to another show, to then, you have 2 weeks at home to work on something and stuff like that. And so, but so much art was produced under those circumstances, so much great art. I mean, in 1964, the Beach Boys put out 4 albums, 3 studio, 1 live, which was sort of studio, and that's not important. But anyways, but like just with how frantically paced all that was and how quality the music still holds up over 60 years later, I find that really inspiring. And so I want to be like the Beach Boys.
Well, why do you think they released so much work in a short amount of time in that period, especially as technology has advanced a lot, and now artists put out albums like every 4 years.
Yeah.
There's some like Bruno Mars has 3 albums to his name, and he's the top Spotify monthly listeners out of anyone, and he only has 3. He's on a lot of singles he does a lot of like cameos and features with songs, but he doesn't put out very much work. And like Frank Ocean too, like Kendrick Lamar will go ghost for 5 years, and then he'll come out and bang, he's the biggest thing. He's doing the Super Bowl, and you know, so like, what do you think that is? Where in the 60s they were doing so much in a little amount of time.
So what I would chalk that up to, and I'm an amateur music historian. I don't actually know. But the way that I look at that is that that's just what the record companies demanded. And the music industry now is different, and artists have more leverage and don't have as much leverage. But back in the 1960s, and really before the advent of the internet, the gatekeeper for the music industry was the record label. They had the recording industry, they had the recording studios, they had the songwriters, they had the distribution channels. All of these things were under lock and key, and you had to get signed to do much of anything. Or to at the very least have the resources to start that upwell and that upward mobility. And what the record labels wanted was product. Now, what I guess would be specific to the Beach Boys is that in the 1950s, rock and roll was invented through the fusion of R&B, jazz, blues, alongside folk and bluegrass. Those all kind of came together, and first there was there was boogie woogie, and then there was rockabilly, and then eventually rock and roll, as we can kind of understand it in the modern context. And this was appealing to a new generation and a new crowd, specifically the baby boomers in the 1950s. They were the first generation to have affluence, to have the amount of wealth they did, because America wasn't rebuilding post-World War II. And so record labels were like, dude, these teenagers want rock and roll. We got to put out as much of this stuff as we can. And so just all these artists are putting out incredible volumes of work, not entirely of their own interests. Like, I imagine that if it was possible, it would be like nowadays where it's like, Frank Ocean and Kendrick Lamar dropping with multiple years in between major studio projects. But back then the media landscape was just entirely different.
They were all completely on their timeline, the record companies.
I'm sure it has to do.
Well, I think the Beach Boys were even sued later in the 60s for failure to deliver the albums that they had promised.
Really?
Because it was one album in late 62, then it was technically 4 albums in 63, then it was 4 albums in 64, then it was 3 albums in 65. In 66 they had 1 album, Pet Sounds, which is phenomenal. 67 they delivered 2 albums. 68 they only delivered 1. 69 they had 1. And so there's just major drop off. And so I think that at a point in 67 they were in breach of contract for something like that. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
But the fact that art produced under such circumstances is still good and still resonates and at least makes me happy, I think is a testament to the workhorse mentality of artists back in the day. I mean, the Beatles, they were repping out, 2 albums 63, 2 albums 63, 2 albums 64, 2 albums 65, 1 album 66, so on and so forth. But the fact that it's still good in 2025, it's like these guys are making pretty good music.
I'm sure it also has to do with the consumption, or how people consume music now, where when you have to go to a record store and buy an album versus you have an album out on streaming for 5 years, it's continuing to get streams, and you have remixes and DJs picking it up, and it's a whole different marketplace as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure that has something to do with it.
I think so. Well, because back in the pre-internet days, and I guess kind of pre-CD, I don't know, people can argue about that, but when it came to vinyl, you had to press discs, and things would fall out of print. If no one was ordering it, it's like, well, we don't want to have 1 million copies of this one random single that really didn't do that well if there's not that demand.
Right.
And so with streaming, that enables artists, well, I don't want to say enables artists because I have a lot of thoughts on streaming, but streaming, there will always be supply because you're basically paying 6 months to lease access to this library, this Leviathan library of music, versus back in the day where the single the single comes out, everybody buys the single or the album or whatever's associated with it, and now they actually own that physical product. Well, the record label's like, well, everybody already bought I'm a Believer by the Monkees, so we don't need to make any more copies. And that's kind of simplifying things, and I don't know if that's entirely historical, but I think you're totally right. That, the way that we consume media changes how art's made.
Now, the difference I could see with the Beach Boys, they have a team of, like, obviously they still have to be involved in an album, but you're putting out a lot of volume and you're doing it on your own.
Yeah.
How would you define your genre?
My genre, I would describe it in its simplest form. I would call myself retro indie pop. I shouldn't say retro, because retro could be anything. I would say, okay, like 60s indie pop or like jangle pop. I'd say 60s. 60s has to be in there somewhere. I think that's such a strong part of my sound and my methodology that the 1960s has to be in that label somehow. So I would say, like, if there would be like a Spotify day list, 60s jangle powered pop.
There's an instrumental on one of the EPs you put out, I think, last year.
Yeah, it was Big Car Beach off Waveside 2. And
I was listening to it in the car, and I'm like, I feel like I'm in I'm in Pulp Fiction right now, or like in a Quentin Tarantino movie, because it had sort of that vibe to it. You mentioned that you have a background in bluegrass.
Yeah.
Want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the earliest parts of me, like, actually doing music or having any kind of like anything to do with music was through the school system here in Reno, Nevada, Washoe County School District. And so the first things that I did, not the first things. If you really want to go to the before times, I guess, at my church, choir music, and the organist at the church, a guy named Joey Giannetti, he would just play this massive 1950s Rogers organ, and it had this phenomenal sound, in the space. And I just remember really being captivated by these rolling chords and the bellowing bass. It was really great. And so that kind of sparked the love and interest of music alongside other really early influences. Going into elementary school, my sister joined the choir, which was like an optional thing that you could opt into. And it's like, okay, well, you're a soprano, you're an alto, we're gonna have 2-part harmony. And so I'm like, I want to do what my sister does, because I look up to my sister. And so I did choir for 2 years. And then my sister, her name's Tori, she went into the middle school orchestra. And so I was like, okay, I'll play the violin too. And so then I started playing the violin. And then Tori was like, I'm gonna take the special advisory class where you play bluegrass for an hour in the morning. You show up at like 6:30. And I was like, I'll do bluegrass. And so we would all show up, a bunch of tired, preteens, to listen to someone pound away in a cajon going, and that's what we did. And so that was kind of, so I think that the way that I would describe myself, not in a mean way, like I can't be mean to myself. I have to allow myself some grace, but also just kind of looking at it frankly, or I guess maybe kind of an honest examination. And I'm not embarrassed, but I would say that as a preteen and into being a teenager, I was kind of twerpy. I was kind of nerdy, in case you can't tell. And I was kind of like, I wasn't really sure what I liked, kind of in the way that I guess a lot of Gen Z men have been or whatever, just kind of being like, oh, I don't like video games like this, just not really, not very sure of many things. But then all of a sudden I was playing violin every morning, and I was like, okay, like I actually really appreciate this style of music. And then it was actually through that then I started playing the mandolin, and there's actually one in the hallway in sight right here. And so the middle school orchestra teacher, very nice lady by the name of Carolyn Carl, she's like, Michael, she could tell that I have interest in music. She's like, do you want to play the mandolin? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And so I started playing the mandolin, and the mandolin's a fretted instrument. It's like, okay, well, that's, one step closer to playing the guitar. And so then somehow guitar entered, my family household. And then I was like, I want to play the guitar. And then that kind of led to that. But so, from about 2014 to 2016, I was really doing a lot of that in the schooling stuff. And we would play around at different, at other schools, as you do in the middle school level. But But that education that I got through the Washoe County School District was absolutely foundational to my understanding of music today. I mean, like the real foundational stuff, like how to count to 4, what is syncopation, what do sharps and flats do, you know, tempo, you want to keep that consistent most of the time, and stuff like that. And so, but also one of the core things that will probably come up later in this discussion is being able to work in a team, because in an orchestra, you have, you know, 16 people all playing the same part. And so you're not improvising. And so you have to know how to work and move and change at the same times, because unless you do, you sound like a middle school orchestra. And hopefully memory serves me decently correctly, but as I recall, we actually weren't that bad for being a bunch of 13-year-olds.
It's really interesting to hear you say that through the school district, you're introduced to like that traditional music. Yeah, I have a long background in traditional music at a family band, actually, when I was a teenager.
Oh, right on.
And we did a little bit less bluegrass, more like Irish, Celtic Irish, kind of music. One of my sisters plays a hammered dulcimer.
Oh, cool.
2006 national champion, actually.
Let's
Shout
go.
out to you, Johnny. But yeah, we had a family band for a bunch of years, and we were really involved in that community down in Southern California. It's pretty thriving down there. But having kind of gotten out of that since my teens, I don't really know how well that music is being shared, especially with younger people. So it's really cool to hear that. It's, at least there's a little bit of a torch being passed through the school district.
Something.
Yeah, that's actually, it brings a tear to my eye. Yeah.
Single glistening teardrop. Did we get it on camera?
What would you say is the most integral instrument for your genre, the 60s?
Just the guitar,
indie pop.
You know.
Yeah?
I mean, but everyone loves the guitar, you know. I mean, I think it's specifically how those instruments are played.
Okay.
Because as you go, because you know, I'm a blues guitarist, you know, I'm a folk guitarist, like doing the finger picking stuff. Like, I'm saying that I'm those things, but like, you know, people are different kinds of musicians and stuff like that. And if you look at the music of the popular music of the 1960s, there starts to emerge, in my opinion, a pretty clear idea of what are the sounds that producers and labels and artists thought were pleasing to audiences. So, you know, like drum patterns tend to fall into a couple of really familiar ways. Like, oh, that's a 60s sort of, you know, drum pattern. Like "Be My Baby" by the Ronettes, Hal Blaine playing on that, dun 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 dun. And so then you can hear similar sorts of things go all around there. Obviously, the surf rock drum beat, which you heard on Big Car Beach, the boom, ba 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 boom, which is all over the early 1960s Southern California surf rock stuff. The Beatles beats, you know, like there's a lot of like Ringo things that did and all that. So I would say, I mean, like for my genre, like how I do music, like guitar is a pretty integral part. But yeah, the way that it's played, like I think that I play like a 1960s guitarist.
Right.
You know?
The electric guitar is probably the most versatile instrument out there.
It's good. I mean, yeah. I think, you ever look at a Telecaster, like really, you know the Telecaster?
Yeah. There's one in there, in the other room.
Oh, snap. Yeah. Leo Fender didn't play the guitar. And I feel like when you look at the Telecaster, you can kind of see that. It's like, well,
there's no body cutouts.
Yeah, I guess you kind of would cut that there and maybe bevel here, and we're gonna put the control switch at you know, perfectly parallel with the strings. That sounds like it's strange, but it's beautiful. You know, I mean, I love
best
it.
guitar ever made, in my opinion.
It is one of the top 3.
I love the Telecaster,
sure.
but it's like, what? Well, even like the Stratocaster.
I've never thought about it quite in those terms before, but you're definitely right. It almost
looks
seems
like a
like
piece
it's
of
like a
bread.
prototype almost.
Oh yeah.
You know, which I guess it kind of was in a way too.
Well, the guitar is right before the Telecaster entered mass production. Like I think there's someone in some museum that it's been christened the No-caster because it's just one of Leo's it just looks like a Telecaster.
It was just a prototype where it was like, it'll do.
Yeah, and it did.
Yeah, my goodness. You obviously have a really deep appreciation for the history of music, like you said, in that period, 1955, 1970.
Yeah.
Is it that you just love that music and therefore want to make it, but what really drew you to wanting to make your own version of that style?
So I guess first I'll speak on why I like that era of music. I think it's it's really more the 60s, but I'm including 55 because I do love 50s rock and roll and pop. And even stuff outside of like the rock and pop space, like I do enjoy like some of the adult contemporary from that period. I'm a big fan of Frank Sinatra. I like Chet Baker. I like Chet Atkins. You know, that's another one. And so just there's good music across the gamut, but that's where my interests tend to lie. But I would say that one of the reasons why I like that period is that in 1955 rock and roll like really starts. Bill Haley, Rock Around the Clock, and then later Johnny B. Good, Elvis, Buddy Holly, all them. Excuse me. But I would say that like what was so compelling about that is that there was this new form of music that was made that was incredibly appealing to teenagers, like kind of the younger sound, like not like, big band and stuff like that. Like, no, this is for the younger crowd. And concurrent with the rise of rock and roll and its many evolutions was a huge boom or a huge advancement in recording technology. So you go from Sun Studios doing everything live to mono, one track, to then, okay, now we have 2 tracks. So we could put on a voice later or add an additional element and then mix that to mono. But then Capitol gets 3 track, I think, at Western Recorders. And then, of course, during the 1950s, Les Paul and Mary Ford are recording on 8 track. And so, but then now we get to 4 track, with Columbia, and then on to 8 track, and then 16. And so it's so interesting because as recording techniques and technology are getting more sophisticated, the art kind of follows, and so you start out with songs that can be just done with a 4-piece band or however many are in Bill Haley's Comets as one live thing straight to mono, and that's the master. And then you start adding extra things like, oh, well, we could add a Celeste to this song. That sounds pretty. Okay, great. And then, okay, well, if we're doing 3 tracks, well, then you get to like bouncing techniques because tape fidelity is getting better too. So you can have generations of tapes, not too many, but okay, well, we're going to do 3-track basic, like on Pet Sounds, add a 4th overdub, and then take that 4 tracks mixed to mono down to 1 8-track reel, and then add the Beach Boys voices, and so, it's a period where technology and artistry both kind of had a really synergetic relationship. And I think that that's the core of why I find it really compelling. But on the flip side of that, speaking of flip sides, records, 45s were still king. Singles were king. Actually, the 45 was a relatively recent invention. It only came about in the 1940s because before that was the 78 shellac disc. And Columbia made the 33 1/3 revolutions per minute record, which is the album that we all still have today. And I think it was RCA were the ones that spearheaded the 45 to basically replace the 78 because the 78 only held 1 song per side. Columbia's long player could hold 33 or could hold like 20 minutes per side. And so each took that niche. You had the album for multiple songs and then you had the singles, which would be a lot cheaper. And it was a singles game. It was a radio game. And so what that meant was that songwriters for the 2.5 minutes to 4 minutes top that they had on one side of a disc to get onto radio had to write the most fire songs that they could. Sure. Like they had to pack everything into that one side of that record, and so I think that because of that, because the limitations of the medium necessitated people to act quickly, I think a lot of great music came out because of that. It's like candy.
Do you write your music today with kind of that inspiration? Like, what if these bands back in the 60s had the technology now and had multi-track recording?
It's kind of both. Like, I think both to like, what would I do if I was put in that situation back in 1965, or what would a group like the Byrds do in 2025, if they were somehow the same people and had access to a DAW and all that, obviously like that's kind of that question doesn't really go anywhere because nothing would be the same. But like I do kind of incorporate that. Like when I am recording, I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna put the drums onto this kind of tube bus because I want the drums to kind of distort and saturate in the way that Motown records do. Or I'm gonna have this send or I'm gonna bake effects into the track, or not really bake effects into the track because I don't like doing that, but I'll bake effects into a bus and then have that bus go into a send. So not only are you chorusing a guitar, you're also chorusing the reverb of that guitar or something like that. It with like guitar, like guitar pedals and stuff like that. a lot of people discussing online, well, what's the best chain order? Like, how do you want to do that? And there kind of is a general wisdom, like, oh, like, you might want to start with this and then do that and then do that and then do that. Once you kind of understand those fundamentals, it's so much fun to break those rules because, like, well, what if I wanted to distort the chorus? I don't want to chorus the distortion or something like that. I don't know. It's just fun like that. So
we could have a very in-depth.
We could
we have
in-depth about pedal chains.
Well, I was going to say about digital audio workstations. I don't think our audience would find that very interesting, but I wanted to mention, kind of to build off of Brian's question. So, like, I love the Police. They almost did everything in one take, and you can kind of tell. It's amazing music, but it's very raw.
Yeah.
And I've always thought, man, it would be so cool if I could take them at that time and put them into today's technology, and to hear what the song would sound like. What would Message in a Bottle be like if it was recorded with today's technology? And I'm getting somewhere, trust me. With the amount of volume that you put out and that you record, you probably have to find ways of saving time to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Like, what are the things that you prioritize most, or things that you kind of let fall by the wayside when you're actually building a track, so that you can just get to completion?
Yeah. Well, I think that my answer to that question would be, I don't know. I don't tend to think about, like, okay, we can save time on this, we can do time with that or something like that. It's just a matter of, like, get it done, get it out, make the song, right? Because, if you're hung up on a song for 5 years, it's 5 years that you're with that song, and then it comes out and it's brand new to someone else. And so it's like, okay, but you can put all this time into something, but if you're not working efficiently, or you can't kind of make the decisions to then push that to the next step, to then actually push that out to people, well, then that's 5 years that's just on you. Versus if you kind of build that catalog of music, it's like, well, then there's a consistent stream of things for people to hear and listen and do. And I think that, kind of circling back and maybe putting a bow on our conversation about, like, music history and how recording mediums and practices have informed art, I'm in that same kind of, I'm in a similar mindset to the artists and labels at the time, where it's just like, you got the take, great, cut, print, go, and so, like, my practice for vocals is I like to work in multiples of 4, and more like 2. Anyways, even numbers. I love even numbers. I'll do, like 4 takes of a vocal, and then I'll comp that vocal. I'm like, all right, that was a better delivery there. That was better there. This is more gentle here. I like that. And so I'll, cut these 4 takes or 8 takes or however many takes I've done. And I'm like, all right, good. Or I'll do, like, alternate voicing. So, like, I'll sing things a different way just so I have a backup for a later comping session. And then I'll do that, and then I'll sum that down to a composite take, and then I'll put that then, like, melody, and it's like, okay, well, that's a little bit distracting. And so I have that iterative process, but that iterative process is so constant and so
you've built the habit.
Yeah, and so I'll get in my car and I'll drive somewhere. I'll drive to campus, or I'll drive to a gig, or I'll drive to
Not
visit
anymore.
friends. True. I graduated.
Congratulations.
Mr. Grad over
Thank
here.
you. Yeah. But, like, I'll get in the car and then I'll put on the song, and then I'll be like listening. I'm like, is that working? Is that sounding good? Okay. Oh, I like that. Yeah. And then I'll do, like, the A/B comparisons. I'm like, all right, like, let's take off the auto tune. Like, am I going too far in some places? And then I'll be like, all right, yeah, like, let's reduce this. Let's do that. And so, like, that iterative process, like, flows so quickly. Like, there's almost like no 0 days in a way. And that's one thing that I would like to talk about is no 0 days, because I've seen that word thrown around a lot for, music production gurus and stuff like that. And I have thoughts on that, but, yeah, there's no 0 days, so no matter what, I'm always trying to work on something. So then that way I can get things out in a time frame that I find appealing.
Right. You have the whole process from start to finish, but you've done it because you've been doing it so many times. It sort of just becomes
second nature.
It becomes a very efficient process. It's because you've done this so many times. Where, like, and I'm very guilty of this too. Being a perfectionist as well. Like, you sit on something and you get distracted, and it's been 3 years that you've been sitting on this thing, and it's only,
and you're doing that phantom mixing, you're pushing the fader up by about
Right.
half a decibel, and you're like,
you get caught in the weeds.
now we're cooking.
No, it's so
and then you listen
true.
back tomorrow and you're like, burn it all down.
But wouldn't you say it takes a measure of, I don't know if self-confidence is the right word, but you have to be able to not. I'm sure you're a perfectionist in many ways, but you also have to let some of that fall by the wayside in order to be able to put stuff out so regularly. You have to be okay with it being what it is, right?
Yeah. Well, there's two sides to every coin. And so it's like, I've got the confidence in the process that I have. The flip side of that is apathy. I'm like, I don't want to work on this anymore. This is boring. Not like it's boring me, but like, all right, like I've mixed it, go. Like I'm not agonizing over every single little automation. Yeah, I think it's a good way of putting it.
Being a musician in Reno, I know because over the last couple of years that we've been doing Reno Live, I've seen your name on shows that we've collected and put on our calendar over those years. So I know you also perform a lot. How difficult, or what is the struggle, and what are the challenges that you've most faced being a musician in Reno?
I would say the toughest thing, I don't want to say struggle, because so far, knock on wood, hasn't been a massive like struggle waiting for something to happen kind of thing. I would say that the most difficult thing for someone in my age bracket, and maybe younger, maybe older, whoever this would apply to, is knowing where to start. I don't think amongst anybody, let alone Reno, but just generally, you could probably speak for a lot of more independent or smaller music scenes or stuff like that, or even just music scenes in general. Where do you start? Because we talked about this a little bit earlier, talking about the history of how promotion and songwriting and production and all that has changed. There's few, if any, gatekeepers to music anymore. For $30 a year, I have my music on streaming and it's available worldwide. And that's about the extent of my expenses when it comes to putting my music out there beyond manufacturing discs.
Right.
And so I think that the problem that faces a lot of artists now is just where to start, because I think that the classic fame story of signed to a record label and then they all lived happily ever after, it's not really a reality anymore. It hasn't been for a while. There's a lot of different players in the game. There's a lot of different things you have to be looking at. Where do you start? A lot of people put their effort towards different sorts of things. People will focus a lot on social media marketing. People will focus a lot on grinding on the live circuit. People will be doing a blend of any one of those things and many things that I haven't mentioned. So I think that the hardest part, maybe about like Reno specifically, in big air quotes, it's not like a Reno thing, I mean, Reno's my hometown. But I would just say it's like where you start.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. And in the artists that I have spoken with, a variety of backgrounds and ages and genres and all that, everybody has a different idea, it seems, which is good because we're all doing different things. But I think that's the thing. It's just, where do you start? What do you do?
Do you think that is holding some young some starting artists that maybe they're either very young or they're just getting into music, but they have a voice that they want to have heard? Do you think that's holding some of them back from really leaping into it?
I think it is. I think that is that something that's holding back? I think so. I think that, well, we're all addicted to our phones. I mean, mine's right here.
Mine's on my leg.
Yeah. I'm not going to be checking, mid-pot. Well, maybe I will. I don't know. Quick Instagram break. No, but...
I got my notes down there, so I keep glancing down.
See, that's pragmatic. I'm like over here checking Reels and checking TikTok. I'm like, oh, that's pretty funny. No, but I think that one of the big hang-ups in my purview, although it's two sides to every coin, and I have I think a nuanced opinion on it, is that a lot of people focus on social media, and it's a really good thing to focus on if you know what you're doing. I don't want to phrase that like I know what I'm doing, because I don't. I think I know what I'm doing, and I think that it's working out okay for me.
It's a tool in the toolbox, but it's not the only tool.
Exactly. Like you can't, like a viral video is great, and social media is how a lot of people get introduced to new music. So there is a lot of value in spending money on advertising and getting in sponsored posts and stuff like that. If you're just focusing on that number, I feel like your heart's going to give out, because it's you and 20 million. So it's you and 20 million other, and so it's like, take the advice that people are doling out online. I think his name's Matt Bacon. The guy with the cigar. There's some guy named Matt that posts social media. With the cigar. I'll show him to you later. But he posts a lot of advice for like musicians and how to leverage social media. And I love that guy's videos. Like, I think they're really informative, and there's a lot of really great advice. There's also a lot of videos that I've seen from him where I'm like, that doesn't apply to me. But what I see when I see that is I'm like, that doesn't apply to me. So then I don't take that advice. or at the very least it's in my brain, so maybe something will come along where that will apply to me and then I can take that advice, but some people are like, well, I'm trying to do this and I'm trying to make these reels, and did I just write the song of the summer, and like I don't know, man, like I don't think that you're gonna make this is true I guess maybe throughout history, but I don't know how much success you're gonna find by copying what other people do to the letter. Find what works, make it work for you, and if nothing else, you might find some personal satisfaction out of that. So like I've kind of got my own way that I do my own social media, and I'll make funny reels from time to time. Like I love doing that because, as we mentioned before we were rolling, a lot of my background is in photo and video, and so I get a lot of joy out of editing, but I can't just be doing that.
Right. It's funny what works, but also what works for you. I mean, with the Reno Live, we took a long hiatus because how we when we started doing it, what we were doing was just killing us. Yeah, we weren't even doing that much, to be honest, but we weren't getting anything in return. We were getting no energy back. And it's one of those things where, like, the amount that you put into it, it's not sustainable unless you're getting an equal amount back. Yeah, there has to be some element of reciprocity, because otherwise, I mean, I relate. Last year, I skated really close to getting all burnouty, and I was like, I gotta re-examine what the hell I'm doing. What gives you a lot of good, what's the word I'm looking for? Like feedback, like what reciprocity. But yeah, like what's the reciprocal energy that you get when it comes to music? Is it playing live? It's a lot of things. It's kind of an all the above. Whatever I get, it's not any one specific metric. Like, but I'll put out a sponsored reel, and then I'll see the line go up, and I go, that's really cool. And then I'll put out a post that people think is funny, and then I'm like, oh, that feels really good, because I mean they build these things to fire those things off in your head. Oh, that dopamine. Yeah, exactly. Yep. my receptors are fried. But so like I guess that's kind of that. It's just it kind of goes back to that no 0 days thing. I guess we could expand on that a little bit. I think that one of the pieces of advice that I saw, maybe even from that Matt dude with the cigar, is like, have no 0 days, right? Good way to burn yourself out. If every single day you're shooting for the moon. Now, obviously, keep your goals high and stay ambitious. But if you're expecting to move mountains every single day, you're going to get squashed. If no 0 days means cleaning your space, that's a no 0 day. You did it. Now go eat lunch. If no 0 days means changing the strings on your guitar, and that's the only thing you do that's even tangentially music related, you did it. No 0 days. And so for myself, like, I'm like, something I'll do is I'll wake up and I'll have something that I kind of already have my story draft ready to go. I'll put it on my story, and it's like, all right, that's my no 0 day. I'm closing my phone for the day, or I'll fire off some emails, content,
just little setups for your future self. Yeah, but if you can, maybe you're not going to move a mountain, but if you can kick a pebble, that can be something. So I would say just that I'm not always like thinking like, what's the thing that I'm getting back? Like, oh, we're getting a really good, click through rate on this ad, something like that. Like, it's a good thing you want, but like, I'm not like thinking like, oh yeah, like this, I'm getting so many more followers. It's like, well, if I get the followers because I like what I'm doing, then that's a good thing. It's gonna be a natural byproduct of that. So I guess that to answer that in a really roundabout way, I think that just kind of the slow drip and byproduct of all of my efforts is what motivates me to continue going. Whether that be more gigs playing live, whether that be more followers, whether that be a wider reach in social media streams, I would say that those are the things that motivate, separate of my love for the art and the craft and the community and all that stuff. Yeah, I really like that. I think that's something that Joel and I are settling into a little bit more now, revamping and rebranding the way that we used to go about the Reno Live process. And sometimes you kind of you're stagnant with inspiration for a while, and you get a little spark, and then you just like kind of full on chase that, and then once that chase ends, you're kind of just sitting there again, and you're like, you kind of go stagnant again, and then you kind of just lose sight of the bigger picture. Yeah. But it's also good to be exploratory and find out what works and what doesn't. I mean, that's how they do science. Right.
No, it's a good take about how you get energy back, because juxtaposed to how much you put out, it's sort of I feel like that's a really good message, because
it is.
You put in the effort and the work to push things out to the world, and that steady drip gives you a steady drip of something back to keep you going. It's a beautiful circle of life, you know?
Yeah. And it's good to focus on multiple things at once, because if you put everything into one thing and that one thing doesn't act exactly the way that you expect or think or want it to, that could be crushing. I mean, I've had that happen a lot where I'm like, I put all this work into something and even, spent money on something to happen or something like that. And it didn't, and it's like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know what to do, And so, but if you have multiple things you can focus on and look at and push at, then it's like, oh, okay, well I'm going to let that do its thing. I'm going to go focus on something else now,
What would you love to see happen or change within the music scene in Reno?
I would like for everyone to talk to each other. That's my big thing. I think people need to talk to each other. I think that there are huge swaths of amazing pockets of talent that don't know about each other. When I was going to UNR, which is circa 2 weeks ago, so like on campus, there's
you can say that now. Yeah. You can officially say when I went to UNR.
Yeah, when I went back in the day. No, but like there are fantastic artists on campus at UNR, really great music acts that I'm huge fans of or friends with, and and they've never heard of the Cellar Street on 4th Street, or the Cellar Stage on 4th Street, or they've never heard of Loud as Folk with Spike McGuire, and Spike McGuire doesn't know about them, and so on and so forth. And so because there's not this kind of community blanket where people actually get to know each other, I think that's one thing that is kind of holding all of us back. I think that if we were all more aware of what everyone's doing and in each other's spaces a little bit more, that would be grounds for a huge upwell of Reno talent, I think.
Where do you think the lack of disconnect comes? Just being out and experience, being a Renoite your entire life, and actually going out and playing gigs in the scene.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different things, and I don't know if this. I perceive it as being relevant. I think it comes down a little bit to the way that Reno is designed as a city. This is not an issue unique to Reno, but we're car built. We're built on our cars. It's not like LA, where a lot of that was developed before the rise of the automotive industry. So there actually are walkable places to be, and you can, communities are more compact and higher number of people per block or whatever. And same thing for the East Coast, because the East Coast is the older part of the U.S. You can't get anywhere in Reno without a car. You can't walk anywhere, and so everyone's living all around the biggest little city, but unless you want to go to the specific thing, you're not going to happen upon somebody,
Every place is like a destination place.
In a way, yeah, and I mean, I shouldn't say nobody. I don't want to speak in absolutes about that, but like,
There's a lot of truth to that, though.
Yeah, but I think one of the biggest joys that I have found in my adult life, and I say adult life because after I turned 21, I started going to the place because I could go to bars, is the Cypress Open Mic in Midtown that happens at the Cypress, hosted by Greg
Wednesday.
Gilmore every Wednesday. Well, every Wednesday there's not something else happening. I think there's actually one this Wednesday, so I'm going to be there.
Nice.
But like genuinely, that place has been such a valuable part of my adult life, both in a social sense, but also in a professional sense, because I've bumped shoulders and met so many people that I've been able to connect with and interface with and work with, and start doing this whole music thing like in a really serious capacity. Because about 3 years ago I quit my last job working at a UPS store, because I'm like, I need to focus on what my studies are for and where my actual passions lie, and I didn't go into that as like, I've got $20 in a dream. Like I want to be really smart and applied about that. And it just so happened that a really great place to make professional connections is at this bar in Midtown, just because all sorts of people come rolling through seeing what it's all about. And so that's, I think, where like there's like real community. I shouldn't say real community. That sounds dismissive of other community, but like that, we all know each other, we're all friends, and then we all tell each other about our projects, and then we have that understanding and that knowing and that growing. And so you can be like an octopus and have one arm in every little spot around town.
That is one of the reasons we started this podcast.
Yeah.
To bring, we want to have both local people like yourself come in here. Even the first one that we did, just Brian and I, we mentioned like, hey, if you're a venue owner or if you're integral to the music scene, we'd love to have you in and chat for that exact reason. Like,
yeah,
then people can become aware that, oh, this is a thing.
Right. Exactly.
And, and then for artists too, like, obviously promoting shows and stuff, but it's interesting to hear you say that, because we kind of identified a similar problem that we
exactly,
wanted to address.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength. I think part of it too is down to like, it all seems to come back to this part of the discussion, but how media is consumed and produced and all that kind of stuff. Back in the day, you had the local radio station. That was the centralized form of media where it's like, okay, everyone's tuning into KHJ or whatever it is, or KOZZ. That was around, or 100.1 VX. That used to be a long-standing local community thing until it went away a couple of years ago. But like, those were the things people would go into and then become aware of other things because, oh, well, my band's being played on this radio station. Well, then I'm gonna hear someone else's band being played on this radio station. And now we all have our own hyper-personalized radio stations in our pockets ready at any time. So you can find your one little niche and live and die in the niche, you know? And so you're not gonna get exposed to anything different. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people in the Reno music scene are unaware of just how diverse and how beautiful it is.
I was very guilty of that before Reno Live too.
Yeah, and it comes from all corners of it. You know, like the young folks don't know, the older folks don't know. You know, the hip and with it folks don't know, the retro folks don't know. Nobody knows, you know, and everyone goes, oh, this town. It's like, just talk to each other, you know, because the second
Or follow Reno Live, where you can
follow
find
Reno
all
Live.
the shows on our calendar.
That's true. but like, if you get aware of what your contemporaries and your peers are doing, that's where the community is going to happen. And I think it's starting to happen. Especially in this kind of post-COVID phase. You know, 5 years ago, the pandemic kicked off. And that threw a huge damper on things. And I think that it also colors a lot of the Gen Z attitude around what the Reno music scene is. I heard a lot of cynicism on campus about like, oh, this town doesn't have this town doesn't have that. And it's like, well, in all fairness, we were all in dorm rooms doing Zoom classes. So maybe the idea of going out and seeing people isn't a thing that we're familiar with going into all this. And so I think that, I think that there's a lot that this town has to offer.
Absolutely.
I'm very optimistic.
So are we. And like Brian was saying, we were kind of guilty of not really seeing what was out there with that is already happening in Reno before we started this. It was eye-opening to see like, oh, there is a lot of music. So Brian's travels around the country going to shows. I, being from Los Angeles, had a lot of access to, you know, any artist I wanted to see.
Right.
And
it's Los Angeles.
So this is the reason we wanted to start Reno Live was like, we want to grow the scene here. And there is a lot that's happening. Like you're saying, people just don't find out about it.
Yeah,
and
let's just connect the dots.
That's exactly what we're trying to
I'll be one
address
big
here.
happy family.
Yeah. You are now graduated. What is next for you? What can we expect? A lot more music from you in the future? Where's your path going to lead?
There's a lot planned. I like to plan, and then I don't plan when I have to. But like, so in terms of like what's in the immediate near future, there's going to be another Michael Tegio album this year, of course. That's going to come out probably in Q3 or Q4. Probably Q3 is what I'm shooting for, late summer release. That'll be the 6th Michael Tegio studio album. I'm also planning on releasing an EP with my live band, Michael Tegio and something else. It's not going to be a live EP, but these are the guys that I've been working with for the past 2 years on stage. And that'd be an interesting thing to talk about, is how that happened. So there are at least 2 more releases planned before the end of 2025. In addition to that, I'm planning on a studio album every year after that. I've already got songs and track lists kind of planned and vague ideas of where I want things to go. In regards to playing live, I intend to keep working out of Reno. I intend to keep doing that. I think that Reno's in a really good spot relative to like what goes on the West Coast, in that we're north enough that you can get into Oregon and Washington, and we're right on that angle of California, where you're 2 hours from Sacramento, you're 5 hours from San Francisco, you're 8 or 9 hours from LA, you know, and so like, you know, in California, the cost of living is a bit more expensive there. And so it's like, well, I think it might work to kind of, you know, stay in Reno and not bankrupt myself and then travel out as needed, you know, as opposed to, you know, trying to actually sustain it out there. So I intend to stick around in Reno at least for another year or two, something like that. Got a lot more music to release, a lot more shows to play. I don't know. Yeah, hopefully, I hope that kind of answers the question. Yeah.
The nice thing about you being local is that we can have you on again.
Yeah.
Where would you like people to find you?
You can find Michael Tegio on Instagram is where I'm most active. That's where you can have the best parasocial relationship with me on Instagram.com/Michael Tegio Music. That's MichaelTegioMusic. I'm active on there just about every single day. I also post a fair bit on Facebook, if that's more of your inclination. You can find me. I have a list of show dates lined up throughout the summer, where you can come and see me and enjoy the music. I hope you enjoy the music. And I also have Michael Tegio Bandcamp, where you can order merchandise if you're listening from somewhere where you might not be able to procure this merchandise locally. And I've also got michaeltegio.com, which I aim to revamp because right now it's very bare bones. Yeah, you can find me all over the place. Just look up Michael Tegio and you'll find me, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us. This was
Thank you so
this
much.
was really
Thank
fun.
you.
I'd love to have you back.
Yeah, I would be thrilled
dive
to
deeper
too.
into all these things. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Michael, for coming on. You can find Michael Tegio in June, playing on June 5th at the Nevada Museum of Art, on June 6th at Shim's Tavern, and a bunch more dates in June. Find his page where you can find all the information there. Listen to his new album, the new single, You're Still My Dream Girl, on all platforms. And we're excited to have a lot more music from you in the future.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank
It's
you.
been a lot of
Absolutely.
fun.
Thank you so much. Until next time, rock on Reno.
Rock on Reno.